Hi everyone, welcome back to Pine Hollow Auto Diagnostics. Another new car, loaded Buick Enclave. It's not new, it's about 10 years old, 2012, 136,000 miles. Belongs to my neighbor. He's about 75 years old. Old school guy, can fix anything. The other day, he says he was actually going to volunteer for a local flower shop for Valentine's Day to deliver flowers using this older Buick, and he's like, hey, I can't open my trunk. So he just calls me up the day before. He's like, Ivan, this is really important. I can't deliver flowers if I can't open my trunk. So I told him, yeah, sure, bring it over. Let's see what's going on. He, traditional guy, he's like, hey, let me check the fuses. So he found a fuse in the interior fuse box. He's like, man, why do they put these fuse boxes in such a tight place? I'm like, Harry, if you haven't seen a Ford BCM, these are actually pretty easy. But let's see what fuse he pulled, and he said it didn't make any difference. So he looked at the fuse layout, very logical instrument panel fuse block. He said liftgate release. This is the fuse that he pulled, the PDM, power mirrors liftgate release. Then he said, try to put it back in, and he dropped it, it fell behind the carpet. He's like, that's it, I give up. He brought it here. So my first step was, let me find that fuse, see what it feeds. He said his passenger door, the mirror stopped working, the door locks, the window, everything stopped working on the passenger door, the front door. And nothing changed with the trunk. It's not operational. You can push the button all day long. Here, nothing happens. It does have the power assist lift gate. You can push this button right here. All day long, nothing happens. You can even push the key fob button. So hold the trunk button. And see, the car recognizes nothing happens to the tailgate. So customer complaint confirmed. I reinstalled the PDM fuse. Passenger door now works. Initially scanned it for codes. There were some codes. Reset everything, cleared it out. And look, we have a completely green tree. No clues, no trouble codes. Liftgate module says no codes. Okay, so let's look at some diagrams. Let's look at the actual health report that I got when the car first came in and see if we have any clues on how to deal with this problem. So first thing, I was curious, why does that fuse, the PDM fuse 15 amp, why did the owner's manual say that was for the liftgate release? So this right here is RPO TB4, and indeed this fuse, passenger door module fuse, feeds the load side for the liftgate latch assembly. And there's a liftgate control switch exterior, BCM, so the BCM receives an input from the little button on the trunk on the outside handle, and then activates this liftgate release relay, and sure enough, that fuse feeds the load side. The only issue is TB4, this vehicle is not equipped with. It's the fancier model with the TB5 liftgate module, and this one is fed by a big 30 amp fuse under hood, power liftgate, and also display fuse 10 amp in that same fuse block. So two power feeds, talks to, on the network to the instrument cluster there. And let's see, so this is the liftgate actuator assembly. Multifunction switch in the instrument panel, that's the one right by the gear shift lever. And then on page 2, this is the liftgate latch assembly, so it's fancier obviously. There's the motor, there's like 3 position contact switches in there. And then we have the liftgate control switch interior. That's when you open the liftgate, that's the button you push to close it. And then there's a liftgate control switch exterior. That's the button on the outside that you push, and then it opens on its own. But regardless, we have no action from this liftgate control module and no trouble code stored at the moment. Okay, the initial health report, this is what the vehicle came in with. So in the BCM, lost communication with door control module B. That's because my neighbor pulled the PDM fuse trying to diagnose this problem. So I put that in, that's not a problem. Driver's door switch, blah, blah. Okay, liftgate module did have one code stored initially. B153A, liftgate latch switch signal invalid. Okay, so that is the only clue that I have at the moment of what's going on with this liftgate. If we look at the trouble code description, B153A, liftgate latch switch signal circuit invalid. The 08 is signal invalid. So there's Paul ratchet sector switch signal and the low reference, as we saw on the wiring diagram, which I actually printed out. So they're talking about these three switches. The liftgate control module has a problem with these. So I think they're open normally. We can read about the description and operation, and we can use that to look at scan data in a little bit. Ratchet, Paul, and sector switches are part of the liftgate latch assembly and are used by the liftgate control module to determine the state of the latch during the process of cinching or unlatching. Yeah. Ratchet and Paul switches will be inactive when the primary and secondary latches are latched. So right now that it's closed, they should be inactive. The sector switch will be active during the power cinch function. Each of the latch switch signals supplied signal through a resistor, monitored, So they're either open or closed, or active, inactive. So those three. When liftgate control module detects a loss of battery plus voltage and open high resistance in the sensor signal circuit, open high resistance in the liftgate latch low reference circuit, or any incorrect combination of signals from the following switch inputs. Okay, so I don't know if his battery was dead at some point. I don't think so. Liftgate may not power open or power close. The latch may be inoperative or not function normally. It says conditions for clearing the DTCs will be current as long as the fault is present. Diagnostic aids. We can open the trunk manually, so that's helpful. Right here, without electrical power, you pop out this little plug and you push the silver lever located on the right just through the access hole to unlock the liftgate. So I think we'll have to do that. Whenever the liftgate control module loses power, is disconnected, the ignition must be cycled off, then on in order to reactivate the liftgate control module. Okay. So they all say inactive with the liftgate closed. We'll look at that in scan data. With the liftgate open, they should be active, active, inactive. Okay, so we can manually open the liftgate and see if these change on scan data. Sector switch test, close the liftgate, allowing the cinch motor to pull the liftgate closed. They should go inactive to active, back to inactive. Alright, so that's a good starting point. Let's get the scanner out, look at live data, see what happens when we try to open this thing manually. Alright, so liftgate module. Go in there, read fault code, no DTCs. Let's try an actuation test, open and close test, and open. Possibly wrong vehicle conditions, not correct request sequence error. So that's not very helpful. Data stream, data, and we have 17 data PIDs. Let's just look at all of them, see if there's anything interesting. Hall sensor feed status, short to ground. That sounds like a problem, but I have no idea. Inactive, 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 inactive. Everything's inactive. There's the Paul, ratchet, and sector switch. Those three are inactive. Open command, open position learned, yes. Liftgate handle switch status inactive. Okay, so let's push the switches and see if the module sees the inputs. So, front control switch right here, if I push the bottom, I just want to turn the system off. So liftgate module disable switch. See, that changed to active. So that knows that. Let's push the top and hold it. See, front control switch changed to active. And I release it. Inactive. So it sees those switches. Liftgate handle switch status. So that must be the button on the back of the tailgate here. So it's going to be, that button there. I'll focus you in on the scanner while I push the button. It's going to be this data PID right here. Liftgate handle switch status. I'll push the button. I'm pushing it. That does not change. So is that a clue? Liftgate handle switch status. Next step, we have to get to this module which lives in the trunk, and we have to open the trunk manually. So let's do that and see where this goes. Alright, so we're inside the trunk. Beauty of Bluetooth scanners is you can put them anywhere. Let's pop off this little access port. Okay, there's supposed to be a little lever, silver something. Maybe it's this guy right there. Let me take a look. Is it that one? Yes. Okay. That hasn't been opened in a little while. So now, did any of our... Look, pulse switch and ratchet switch changed to active. So that seems to work. Okay. Now, let's see if this button right here, if that works on scan data. And that, on the wiring diagram, it connects to the same wire as the exterior button. So this liftgate handle switch status. So if I push this button, right there it says active. Inactive. So you can hear something's happening. This thing tried to do something. Okay. So you see liftgate motor close command, open command, those are both inactive. Latch sector switch went from active to inactive, and latch motor release command went from active to inactive. Okay, very interesting. Let's see if this thing set any trouble codes now. Nope, no trouble codes. Well, obviously the motor isn't doing anything. In here, that's convenient. See the huge gears. There's the module right in here. So basically, I see two issues. This button here works, but the button on the outside does not work. even though they're supposed to be tied to the same wire. That's one problem. Second problem is the power assist doesn't work. Are those related? Doesn't seem like it. What's the next plan of attack? I would take another look at the wiring diagrams, check powers and grounds of this module, because it's saying it's not commanding the motor, the assist motor, to go up and down. Then we'll have to figure out what's wrong with that button. So what we just learned is this liftgate control switch interior, that works. That at least does something to the latch. The module responds and says active. In parallel to that, we have liftgate control switch exterior. This does not work. It's basically a button that's in parallel, so they're supposed to do exactly the same thing. All right. So this one, for some reason, doesn't work, and then this assist motor is not working. So let's see if we manually close it, if it'll, like, you know, pull itself in and cinch. Okay. Obviously we can't open it now. But that thing did the right thing. I wonder if I can just push the button here. Oh! Okay. Did we set a trouble code? Interesting. Nope, no trouble codes. So was this thing possibly, I mean, it's his second vehicle, maybe it was sitting for a long time and it couldn't, you know, just couldn't force itself open? Let's try the button on the dash and the key fob and see if the tailgate magically just starts working again. Alright, so let's try this. Ta-da! All the way up, and if we press it again, all the way down. And keep in mind, I have a battery maintainer on this thing, so it doesn't drain its battery. So right now everything seems to be operational. Let's try it from the fob. Yeah, this thing barely fits in my garage. Okay, so now the only thing that doesn't work is the button on, you know, right here. I'm sure my neighbor would want it to work. So that's good news for this module. So it must have been stuck in some funk where it just didn't want to activate for some reason. This might be another episode of why new cars can potentially suck. I mean, this one starts and runs and drives okay, but annoying stuff like this, you know, you can't open your truck because it's super complicated. Let's figure out what's wrong with that exterior button. Alright. That one seems to be happy. So this button, so I picked it out with a pick, and here's what it looks like. It's this flat, like, little contact plate with 2 wires. Doesn't seem like a very solid design, but what's the problem? Wiring or button? Well, very easy check. We can just short those 2 wires together. You use a piercing probe, and we can seal those holes up because obviously this thing lives in a crappy environment. And see if it's just a bad button or if there's a wiring problem. Alright, so I have both wires probed at this button, and according to the diagram, one side should be tied directly to ground. It goes back into the module, that's a ground. So the other one, we should have some kind of positive voltage on here. And when you close it, then the module senses that and it triggers the whatever activation. So we need some kind of voltage and a ground. So first thing I want to do is take a little test light and just jump one to the other and see if anything happens to our tailgate. Nothing happens to our tailgate. Okay, so now I have a power and ground coming all the way from the front of the battery, and if I plug my test light across here just to check that we have both power and ground. So this is our known good power and ground. So first let's see if we can find the ground wire. Okay, so that looks like a bright test light. So we know the ground integrity on this purple wire is good all the way through the module. Now, do we have a voltage on this sense wire? This should be high until you press the button. So let's put a meter on there, see if there's any voltage. Alright, got the meter hooked up, and right now we're measuring between ground and the positive, and we have 13.5 volts. Okay, so the meter works. Now what I want to do is use the positive lead of the meter to measure is there anything coming in on this sense wire. 1.3 volts. Does that make any sense? No, I don't think so. It should not be 1.3 volts. I think it should be like battery voltage. So that's the wire we're going after, that white wire, and we can actually compare what the voltage is supposed to be if we take out the other button, the one that's kind of on the trim. And I mean, this shouldn't be too hard to figure out. Alright, so some disassembly required. So this right here, gray and black and purple and white wires, those go to the interior button, which I popped out, and this purple and white and gray wire go to the exterior button. You can see right here there's this intermediate connector, and sure enough the purple and white wire is upper right corner, turns into the purple white right here, that's the ground, and the sense wire, the gray, is in the third pin over on the bottom row, and that's our gray and black on the bottom row. So two measurements I want to do: voltage right here at the sense wire and voltage at the button on our pierced wire up there. So let's do that. This is coming right from the button, and on my meter we see that 1.2 volts. I don't think that's correct. So now let's take a piercing probe and measure it on this side, right at this connector. So we'll take our meter lead right here, put it on our probe, and we have 12.9 volts. So somewhere between here and the button there's a for some reason this wire turns from 12 or 13 volts, battery voltage, to 1.1. My question is, does the button work? So we can see what it does to the sense wire. So let me close the trunk a little bit. Maybe we can set up our meter right here. So right now we have 12.9. Let me squeeze the button, see if that makes any difference. So I'm pressing the button. No difference at all. If we measure instead at the sense wire on the button, here we have our 1.2 volts, and I squeeze the button, it goes to 0. So I think the button works. There's something wrong with this gray wire. So, should we do a tug test? I think it's going to be a problem right in this area right here where it's like gooped in there. I'm just going to pull on it, a little key tug test. No. Well, it's pulling it right through. I'm sure it pulled the button through. Yeah, it sure did. So what gives? Why do we have 1.2 volts here and 12 volts on the other side? Well, I pulled on that gray wire from this side and green crusties. Okay. So I guess we gotta take this whole mess apart and feed that wire through and resolder it to this one, which I don't know why. Oh, there we go. There's the other end of it, I guess. How the heck do we put that back through? Well, let's figure that out. But I can prove that if I ground this wire, then it'll definitely make the tailgate work. Let's see, where's a good ground here? Here? Motor? Yep. Okay. So this car's almost fixed. No parts required, which that's a bonus. But still, I'd rather have a manual tailgate. Alright, so I got the whole trim piece off the trunk with the button. Here's one end of the wire. Here's the other end that we pulled through this grommet. And you can see the green crusties. I guess it rubbed through or from vibration or something. It doesn't take much. A little pinhole. And this is positive all the time, even when the car's off. Any constant positive wire, you get a little moisture in there, the green crusties will just spread with no end in sight. So like this little hole that we poked, yeah, we're going to have to seal that up really, really well. Do a really nice job with the soldering here. We'll cut this, shorten it a little bit. You see the whole wire is turning to green pus. And somehow feed it through. So this will actually reach, I think, right here. So we can do the soldering and then secure it back in here. That's all little details. This Buick is as good as fixed. Alright, so this plastic cover actually pops off. It makes the wiring pretty accessible. So I fed the gray wire back through the grommet. Here is the broken end. Here's the other broken end. You can see right at this bracket, apparently it rubbed a little hole through and created the green crusty. So we'll have to prevent this. Put some nice shrink wrap on there so that won't happen again. Put this thing back together. It should be as good as new. Okay, so I got the button popped back in. Used a little silicone to seal up those pinholes from our piercing probes. Now let's cut off the green until we get nice shiny copper. These are really thin gauge wires. Strip that back. Strip this back. And we'll just solder them right here. Put some shrink wrap on there. And it should last another 10 years. So this definitely won't take much. Just a little dab of solder on those tiny wires. Should be just perfect. Wait for our soldering iron to heat up. I'm always amazed how fast this thing is. Like, boom, I'm ready. Modern technology, huh? There we go. That's all we need. And put a long piece of shrink wrap over this. That way, get a little extra protection. This has the sealant right in the shrink wrap, so watertight seal in this area is extremely important. Alright, that's it. We can plug it in, bench test the button, but I think we're in good shape. Alright, moment of truth. Sweet! So, interesting symptoms that the tailgate was basically disabled with no trouble codes. Again, this in that latch, whatever, the code that we looked up, that was a red herring. I don't see any issues with that. We did have a corroded wire at the exterior button. Now again, would that cause this issue? I don't think so. It's kind of weird. It works for now. We fixed the button. We'll give it back to the customer, let him drive it, and hopefully his trunk stays working. So, you know, not really surprising to have fancy features fail, but you know, 10 years, they just want you to get a new car. And ironically, they bought a brand new Enclave before this one started giving them trouble, so they're already ahead of the curve. This one's just their backup. They just like their Buicks. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.